Mr. President, speaking about this data protection system, I have two questions in one. How far we can go and how far we must go with this?
They're both excellent questions, and they're open questions. In other words, there's still a lot of argument, a lot of legislation fighting on both of them. The problem with Europe in the past few years is that it has began applying through laws, and usually through a bad application of American laws, since September 11th. Laws that the American public is waking up to today and saying, hold on, what did we do all these years? Why did we go so far? Europe seems to be coming with a lag of time, trying to apply the same things today. Since we both come from countries that suffered dictatorships of one form or another, in Greece we had a dictatorship for 7 years, I always find it interesting to remind people the following. During the Greek dictatorship, they opened files on everyone. Lambrinidis. Is he potentially a communist, or is he potentially a, green lover or whatever? The first thing on those files was, what newspaper does Lambrinidis read? From the newspaper you read, it was presumed that you were this or that or the other. When the dictatorship fell in Greece, we burned those files. The first thing we did is we said, now we have a democracy, we burned them. Let's jump now to 2010. Every newspaper you visit on the internet, you leave a signal, a footprint, that you personally have gone and seen it. Does the mere fact that today you read newspapers through the internet, does that in and of itself give the right to any police or any private company to begin collecting information for you, what you read, what you eat, what medicine you take, and create a profile for you, which may not be a profile created by a dictatorship anymore, but nevertheless is a very, very dangerous profile sometimes. People are profiling people for potential terrorist activities, and usually based, and many times based on their political beliefs or the presumed beliefs. My answer to this is obviously no. The mere fact that today we do our work through the internet does not mean that we give our consent to anyone. Government or private company, I underline the private company, is a big issue. It's a big problem.
We'll come back
to doesn't mean we give consent to them. So, what are the limits? European law has already set them, but of course their interpretation is always very difficult. If I take any measure that infringes upon your fundamental rights, your freedom to speak, to think, your privacy, that measure must be necessary in order to fight the bad we're trying to fight, proportionate, so if you want to stop me from breaking this glass, you can't kill me, it's got to be proportionate, and appropriate in a democratic society, necessary and proportionate and appropriate, not or, either necessary or proportionate, or all three. How many cameras do we need in the streets? No cameras? Some people will tell you no cameras. Very few people say this today. Okay, if we're going to have some cameras, where do we put them? Under what test? I just described it to you. A big issue that is coming now, and I gave you a long answer to a simple question, but it is a difficult question, is let us say that in a few years' time, a company manages to have a small camera, so small, and I bet you it's going to happen, that you can put one in every bedroom of every house. You don't even see it. And the police comes and tells you, you know what, we put cameras around the American embassy, but now the terrorists know that there are cameras there, so now they're conspiring 3 blocks down.
And if it's true?
If it is true,
yeah,
that the terrorists are conspiring, 3 blocks down, you mean? Well, we have to fight all these bads with a much more effective police cooperation, if you like traditional police, which we do not have today. The example of the US, of the December bomber in the US was a classic example of not connecting the dots of information we already have. Instead of every time, under the fear of a new potential terrible attack, implementing even new laws, even new measures that provide absolutely no guarantee for our security, most definitely provide additional violations of our fundamental rights, without having ensured that what we already have in the books gets applied. We don't have this today. We do not have this today.
This is, let's say, the first part of the answer, because it's the technical part of the answer. But I have another question related to the moral side of this whole business. You know, I come from Romania. You evoked the 7 years of dictatorship in Greece. You know how for 50 years our life was spied every moment, and we lived under the fear to be a part of a scheme, of a terrible scheme, which could lead to prison, to punishments of all sorts. And this was based on the impossibility of having a private life. Is it moral to come back again now in the Europe of 2010 with the same, let's say, possibility, even theoretical, to have such a law?
In my view, no. And what you mentioned before as technical aspects, fortunately or unfortunately, this debate are deeply political. So when I mentioned before the cameras on the streets, I mentioned them in order to describe to you a potential political argument. If people say that the cameras on the streets are not good enough anymore because now terrorists are conspiring in living rooms or in bedrooms, they will come to us and say, can we please put a camera in your bedroom? Unless you want to be helping terrorists kill us. This is, to me, the biggest and most dangerous moral problem we'll be facing the next few years. Not only what it is that police and private companies ask us to consent to, but whether or not we shall consent to it. In today's world, the Big Brother society will not come because a communist regime or a dictatorship will impose it. If it comes at all, it will come through our consent. We will say yes to it. We may not say yes to a camera in our bedroom, but we will have said yes to 100 measures before that, that salami slice of fundamental rights, without necessarily, by the way, effectively protecting our security. And one day we may wake up to the camera and say, did I really say yes to this? And the answer is, well, yes, you did. Maybe not to this, but to those 100 things.